There is a strange kind of happiness that nobody posts about. It happens when a plan gets cancelled. For a second you pretend to be disappointed. You type, no problem, maybe next week. But somewhere beneath the polite words, your body relaxes. The evening is yours again. No conversation to maintain, no expression to manage. No need to be interesting, attentive, funny, available, or even understandable. And that relief can feel so good that it raises an uncomfortable question. When did being with people begin to feel like work? Maybe you have started calling yourself antisocial. Maybe other people have called you distant. But what if neither explanation is quite right? What if the desire to be alone is not really about disliking people at all? There is a reason solitude feels different now. And once we understand it, we also have to face the moment when comfort quietly becomes a cage. The easiest explanation is personality. Introverts recharge alone. Extroverts recharge around people. Perhaps you were simply born this way, or perhaps it is adulthood. Work consumes your attention, responsibilities consume your patience, and by the end of the day, there is nothing left to give. Maybe it is anxiety, maybe it is disappointment, maybe people have become less patient, less sincere, and more difficult to trust. Every one of those explanations can be true, but they do not explain why the feeling has become so widely recognizable. In a 2024 national survey of more than 1,000 American adults, 56% said that getting adequate time alone was very important to their mental health. That does not mean 56% hate social contact. It means the need to step away is not a rare quirk anymore. For a majority, it feels like psychological maintenance. But maintenance from what? The answer is not hidden in the room where you are alone. It is hidden in everything that follows you into that room. Imagine coming home after a crowded day. You close the door, the sound outside becomes softer. Nobody needs an answer. Nobody is reading your face. Nobody can interrupt the thought you have not finished yet. The comfort is not only symbolic. Research on solitude has found what psychologists call a deactivation effect. Across a series of experiments, time alone lowered the intensity of high arousal emotions. Not only unpleasant ones, such as anger or nervousness, but also excited, energetic states. When solitude was freely chosen, it could produce more relaxation and less stress. In simple terms, being alone turns down the emotional volume. That is why your bedroom can feel different from an empty office, even if both contain no other people. One is chosen, the other may feel imposed. Choice changes the meaning of silence. And this gives us an important distinction. Wanting time alone is not automatically a warning sign. Sometimes it is an intelligent response. The mind is reducing its own temperature. But here is the detail that complicates everything. You can be physically alone while your mind remains surrounded by hundreds of people. You sit alone and open your phone. Within minutes, you see a stranger's breakfast, a former classmate's promotion, a couple's vacation, someone's political rage, a creator's perfect morning routine, a public confession, a private argument made public, a tragedy on another continent, and a person your age buying the life you thought you would already have. None of these people are in the room, yet each of them asks something from your attention. One asks you to compare, another asks you to judge, another asks you to care, another asks you to become angry, another quietly suggests that you are late. For most of human history, the number of lives a person could regularly observe was limited. A village knew many things about you, but it did not place thousands of carefully edited lives in your hand before breakfast. Now you can wake up alone and before speaking to anyone, encounter more faces, opinions, achievements, disasters, and emotional demands than a person once met across days. This does not necessarily make you connected. It makes you exposed, and exposure has a cost that is easy to mistake for hatred of people. More than a century before social media, the sociologist Georg Simmel noticed something similar in the modern city. In his 1903 essay about life in the metropolis, Simmel argued that city dwellers were exposed to such a rapid succession of impressions, encounters, noises, demands, and differences that they needed a psychological shield. They became more reserved, less reactive, sometimes indifferent. He called one version of this the blasé attitude, not the absence of a soul, but a defense against too much stimulation. The city made people protect their inner world by appearing less affected by the outer one. Now imagine Simul's metropolis compressed into a screen. The crowd no longer ends when you leave the street. It sits beside your bed. It follows you into the bathroom. It vibrates in your pocket. It waits beside your dinner. And unlike the old city, this crowd has learned what keeps your attention. So perhaps your growing distance is not proof that you care less. Perhaps indifference is sometimes the mask worn by a mind that has been asked to react too often. And we're now close to the answer promised at the beginning. But first, we need to understand why digital interaction can exhaust us, even when almost nothing physically happens. A real conversation has a beginning and an end. You meet someone, exchange attention, and eventually leave. Digital social life often has no ending. There is always another message that could be answered, another post you could acknowledge, another group you have neglected, another opinion you are expected to have. Even silence becomes visible. People can see that you read the message. They can see that you are online. Availability is no longer an event. It is the default expectation. Researchers use the term social media fatigue for the mental exhaustion associated with technological, informational, and communication overload on social platforms. Notice what this means. You do not need to be actively arguing with anyone to become tired. Processing the stream can be enough. Every post is small. The total is not. Your mind repeatedly changes emotional direction. Amusement, envy, concern, outrage, admiration, suspicion, desire. It performs dozens of tiny social adjustments while your body remains almost motionless. And this is the central answer. You may not be withdrawing because you are antisocial. You may be socially exhausted. You are not necessarily tired of one person. You are tired from carrying fragments of too many people at once. But discovering the cause does not solve the problem because the cure can become addictive. There is another reason the crowd inside the screen is so tiring. It does not merely show you other lives. It turns them into measurements. You compare your ordinary Tuesday with someone else's wedding, your first attempt with their finished result, your private uncertainty with their public confidence, your entire life with the most displayable seconds of theirs. Most of the time, you know this comparison is unfair. Knowledge does not make you immune. The mind still registers rank, belonging, approval, beauty, progress, and exclusion. It keeps asking questions you never consciously chose. Am I falling behind? Should I be happier? Why does everyone seem more certain? Why is their life beginning while mine feels paused? This is why closing the door can feel peaceful, but closing the app can feel even more peaceful. For a moment, there is nobody nearby to become a standard. Alone, you do not have to perform a version of yourself that can survive comparison. You can exist without being evaluated, or at least without seeing the evaluation. That relief is real. It deserves respect, yet it contains a subtle danger. If other people become associated mainly with pressure, comparison, and obligation, then isolation begins to feel not merely comfortable, but safer than connection. And whatever repeatedly makes us feel safe is something we begin to repeat. At first, staying home is a pause. You decline one invitation because you are depleted. The quiet helps. Next time, you remember the relief, so you decline again. Gradually, you stop deciding based on whether you want to see someone. You decide based on which option creates the least immediate discomfort. This is how a shelter can slowly become a boundary. Human relationships contain friction. People misunderstand. Conversations pause awkwardly. Plans require energy. Friends occasionally disappoint us. If solitude removes all of that friction, the outside world can begin to feel unnecessarily difficult. And the less often we tolerate ordinary social discomfort, the larger it can appear. The problem is not that you enjoy your own company. That can be a strength. The problem begins when you no longer use solitude to return to life, but use it to avoid returning at all. A useful question is not, how many hours do I spend alone? It is, what does my time alone prepare me to do next? Does it restore your patience, curiosity, and ability to connect? Or does it make every future interaction feel like an invasion? That question separates a refuge from a retreat. The philosopher Hannah Arendt made a distinction that helps us understand this. For Arendt, solitude and loneliness were not the same condition. In solitude, a person is alone but still capable of keeping company with themselves, thinking, questioning, remembering, and returning to the shared world. Loneliness is a deeper disconnection, not simply the absence of people, but the loss of meaningful belonging. In that sense, solitude can strengthen a person, isolation can shrink their world. The difference is not visible from outside. Two people can spend the same Saturday alone. One may emerge clearer and more open, the other may feel further away from everyone. This also explains why endless scrolling is often poor solitude. Your body is alone, but you are not truly keeping company with yourself. Your attention is still occupied by an invisible crowd. You receive many signals of human presence without the depth, reciprocity, or safety of a real bond. So you get the stimulation of society without always receiving the nourishment of connection. Then you seek more isolation to recover from the stimulation, while continuing to carry the same crowd in your pocket. That loop can continue for years. Exposed, depleted, withdrawn, scrolling, exposed again. The solution is not to eliminate solitude, it is to recover its purpose. This is larger than an individual habit. According to data summarized by the US Surgeon General, Americans' average time alone increased by about 24 hours per month between 2003 and 2020. Over the same period, in-person time with friends fell from around 60 minutes a day to 20. The pandemic intensified part of that change, but the movement toward more solitary life had already begun. And in 2025, the World Health Organization reported that roughly 17 to 21% of people aged 13 to 29 experience loneliness, with the highest rates among teenagers. Notice the paradox. Many people genuinely need time alone. More people are spending time alone, yet loneliness remains widespread. That is because quantity is not the same as quality. More isolation does not guarantee real solitude, and more digital contact does not guarantee real connection. We have built a world where a person can be socially stimulated all day and emotionally accompanied by almost no one. So the question is no longer whether being alone is good or bad. The question is whether your solitude belongs to you, or whether it is simply the place where you recover enough to tolerate another day of unwanted exposure. Healthy solitude does not require disappearing from the world. It requires changing what you are recovering from and what you are recovering for. First, create moments that are not only physically solitary but socially silent. A walk without a feed, a meal without watching strangers live, 10 minutes in which nobody else's success, anger, beauty, or opinion enters the room. Second, separate people from the machinery surrounding them. You may be exhausted by constant messages, group chats, public performance, and comparison, not by the friend sitting quietly across from you. A slow conversation with one person is not the same experience as exposure to 500 people. Third, notice the result of your solitude. Good solitude should gradually make choice possible again. You can say yes because you want to, and no because you need to. Not no automatically because every interaction feels dangerous. And finally, protect a few relationships from the logic of performance. Not every conversation needs to be impressive. Not every silence needs to be filled. The safest connection may be the one in which you do not have to produce a version of yourself. None of this means forcing yourself into crowds. It means refusing to let an exhausting form of social life convince you that all social life is exhausting. Because the opposite of overstimulation is not permanent isolation. It is selective, meaningful connection. So the next time a cancelled plan fills you with relief, do not immediately accuse yourself of being cold, broken, or antisocial. Listen to the relief. It may be telling you that your attention has been crowded for too long, but do not worship the relief either. A closed door can give you back your mind. If it never opens again, it can also reduce your world. The goal is not to become endlessly available. The goal is to become available by choice, to people who feel real, in moments that feel human, after giving your mind enough silence to recognize the difference. Maybe you are not antisocial, maybe you are tired. But the most important question is not what you are tired of. It is what you still want to return to after you have rested.